Stoney Winston. How are you?
I'm doing great, Matt. How about yourself?
I am doing swimmingly, man. We're ready to rock. I dumped down. I would love a sponsor. Okay, you know who I want to sponsor me? I would love Snake River Beef to sponsor me because I eat their beef jerky all day. Because I'm in here all day long and I never leave for like breakfast, lunch, or whatever. And I get home and eat dinner at 6. But I eat their beef jerky from Costco all day long. Holler at me, Snake River.
There you go.
Yeah.
What a great sponsor that'd be.
It'd be great. I was just going to say, I'm very happy because I just dumped down a bunch right before you got here, which is great. Here it is. You are the president of Region 3 for the Idaho Superintendent Association. So that association represents the roughly 150, 160 superintendents of public instruction in the state of Idaho. Now that includes your neighborhood public school district. It also includes charter schools that are overseen and funded by the state of Idaho. You guys are hired by the school boards. The school boards represent the elected arm of the public school system. So we all, like West State has 5 school board members. They get elected and their main charter is to make sure that they hire and retain the best superintendent who executes on delivering the education in that area. That's correct?
That's correct.
Look at that. I'm getting it.
Good job.
I nailed something. You also happen to have a blazing orange shirt on. Now, what you don't know about me is I love Honda Fits, those ridiculous little cars with like 14-inch alloy rims. And my dream is to get a Honda Fit blazing orange. So like, you're taking me back. My wife will never let me have it though. Oh. It's unfortunate.
Well, that's poor.
Listen, isn't it a poor choice?
Right. She should let you have it.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't ask for a lot. Like, I'm not trying to go on like, heli skiing trips. Just give me the Honda Fit. Stoney, here we are. There's a big raging debate about education in the state of Idaho. You are the superintendent of the Fruitland School District, correct?
Correct.
And how many students in the Fruitland School District?
Just under 1,600. We're about 1562.
1562. So smaller rural school district. There are a lot of problems with funding the rural school districts. I had Representative Galaviz on the other day. She was talking about the distribution from the state, and it's just, again, average daily attendance. So West Ada might get $150 million, whereas somewhere like Fruitland might get, like 500,000, whatnot, barely enough to paint all the school buildings. But be that as it may, what is your position on everything that's happening around education?
Well, I think the most important thing to talk about is the good things that public education is doing for students. I mean, I've seen a few of your podcasts and stuff, and you talk about per pupil spending, and you know that we're 50th or 51st, depending on which study that you look at.
Sure.
But our test scores are not that, they're in the 20s. So rate of return on investment, that's pretty darn good. And with the movement to keep on having tax breaks going, cutting taxes. And then you start talking about, okay, well, we're going to cut taxes and we're going to give some money to private schools. Now, all this is under the guise of school choice. But what I really look at it as is a way in which to fund private education with public funds, because people are already able to choose where they're going to send their kids to school. Now, some people may say, well, I don't have enough money to do that. Well, a lot of times they can find scholarships and stuff to those private schools. There's different ways in which, if you really want something, you pretty much can do it, I think. But the fact that we're in this discussion with saying that we're going to take $50 million and fund private education when public education is not fully funded, that's an issue.
Here's a question for you. And as you brought up, you're like, look, we're 50th or 51st in funding, but we are, let's say 20th or something in test scores. And we're talking about education. One thing that's really coming to the surface through all of these conversations is it's like, hey, can you define education? Like, what is it? Because a lot of people are saying, I had Representative Den Hartog on, and she brought one of the school choice bills and had a great conversation with her. And her position was, hey, we need to redefine accountability and like make schools accountable to parents. And it's like, okay, I understand what you're saying, but like accountable for what? Like they theoretically should be accountable for education if we're using this under the guise of like educating Idaho. Okay, great. But even with that, you're like, well, what is the education that people are getting out of the private schools, right? Like, do we have analogous test scores? Do we have, could we just ask people to take the exact same test that like a one-off, right? Like, what if a bill came to pass and it was like, all right, this is what we're going to do. We are going to pass a full voucher. We're going to pay the whole tuition. Okay. But to do that, we're going to have to make your student body this year take these state standardized tests. And if you beat the average of Idaho, then you can qualify for this money. But if you don't beat the average for Idaho, then you don't get this money. So we have at least some barrier, some metric of like, you have to establish an educational performance within your student body that, by the way, we all know you get to select. So you probably kicked out the lowest performing kids right before, or whatever it is. You already get to, and Idaho public schools, they don't get to do that. They have to take all public school kids. So like, but can we get you to take this test? And if you can perform better than the average of Idaho, you have this money. But like, if we could get, like, what would you think if somebody said, hey, let's make a contracting mechanism that the people taking this money from you, from Fruitland, from whoever else, whatever Idaho taxpayer, they just need to adhere to the exact same regulations that you guys have in Fruitland?
Well, I think if you ask the homeschool folks, because that's what, they can use this money too that's in the different bills, as long as it's, going towards textbooks or stuff. They're telling you that they don't want to go along with those regulations. They don't want any government involved whatsoever. So they're not going to do it. The private schools, they might take you up on if it's going to be a 1-year thing, but they don't want to do the consistent reports that we have to do. Was there 50 some different reports that we're doing throughout the year? And that's on top of the federal reports that we're doing. So there's just so many things right now and every year they keep on bringing more and more onto the plate and saying, okay, well, you need to do this to show us that you're actually doing something with the money, which then you almost need another person to do that, but we don't have enough funds to hire another person. So
right now, it was my understanding, I talked to Dr. Derek Bubb out of West Ada last week, and he has, I think it's almost like a half dozen people that are full-time administrators that just do reporting to tell, whatever the funding body is. They're like, or the state or whoever it is, that, hey, yeah, these requirements that you have, we are fulfilling these requirements. I assume Fruitland, even at, 1,600 students, you have at least somebody who's like, it's got to be like 60% of the work week going after this. So do you have like a dedicated person? Or I
got my business manager and myself that do most of the reporting with that stuff. Well, I should say on the federal side, I do have my special ed and federal programs person. They're filling out the federal program stuff. But as far as the state concerns, it's my business manager and myself.
So you have 3 people that at least in part-time have to dedicate time all the time to filling out and reporting back to the state.
Yep.
That's a lot. And that is not time focused on, if I were to unleash you and say like, okay, Stoney, you go ahead and you do whatever you think is best to improve these test scores, improve GPAs, teach the children, save the children, you probably wouldn't spend like 50% of your time filling out forms.
No. I'd be in classrooms more, making sure, looking at what we're doing, especially in early literacy. One of my biggest passions right now is, raising our reading scores. We didn't have great reading scores when I went into the district this year, and our focus has been, we're going to get these kids up to grade level. Now, we're probably not going to get 100%. No. We ended the year last year about 50% proficient. Well, that's too low. So we've been working and striving to get things going, but imagine if I had a little bit more time and energy in which we could be focusing on that and keeping that going. I mean, we still are, but I just feel like there's more that we could do.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say Fruitland is tied to at least some degree of like ag community.
Yes.
Okay. That's
actually probably one of the best FFA programs in the state.
Well, Superintendent Stewart might have issue with that, considering I bet Marsing has a pretty good program too, but maybe not quite as good. I have no idea. Norm's going to be mad at me. Anyway, the point is...
Norm's always mad at me.
So considering that, there are 2 things that I want to point out, because people beat up on Idaho for proficiency, okay? They really hammer them hard. The school I went to in Northern California, It was in the SF Bay area. When it opened in the late 70s, this is what I found out, like kind of digging through things over as I became an adult, trying to understand the education system I came from. When the school opened in the 70s, it was this like really up and coming school, and the area was fine and no problem. I believe it was the late 80s, they redrew the drawing map for which schools drew from which areas. And the high school I ended up going to got redrawn to essentially absorb this huge portion of the community that were migrant workers, right? Because that's just what we had immigrant families. So all of a sudden, my high school, when I went there, was something like 55 to 60% Hispanic. And a lot of those are first generation. And some of them were people that, it was ESA, now it's ELL. ESL, now it's ELL. English second language was what they called it when I was going to school. Now it's English language learners, right? So that school dropped in proficiency instantaneously from, whatever it was before down to like whatever it was after you had a bunch of kids that concentrated there who didn't speak English at home or things like that. This is a reality that Idaho has to face as well. I know this for a fact because when I volunteered in my first graders class last year, there was this very nice girl. I can't remember her name, but she could not read at all and she could barely speak English. And here I was there like doing these little reading books with her, trying to, help her sound out letters and stuff. But it's like, was that school doing a worse job because they had that student who would not pass an English proficiency test? That's not a fair thing to assert. So although we have a 50% proficiency in your school district, I assume you have some significant degree of migrant workforce or people of that nature.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. We have our ESL program, and, we're about, I think it was 9% last I looked for our ESL population.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a factor in that, but like you said, we take every kid that comes across the threshold of our doors, and we're going to educate them to the best that we can do for them and try to engage them so they're producing the best that they can do.
Gotcha.
That's our goals as public educators.
Now, the other thing is with 50% proficiency, we have no idea what private schools are as far as proficiency, correct?
Correct.
So like we can beat you up for being 50% proficient and then say we should give the money to this other person. I have no idea how proficient they are. Right. So as a representative of the superintendent, association, what are things that you guys have been getting after? Because I mean, we could argue about school choice, and first off, I'm not arguing. I'm pro education across the board. However you want to cut it, I just think we should be like realistic with how we do it. What the Superintendent Association obviously has an opinion on this, but the Idaho education has been making a march to improve its education every single year for, forever, but in recent years has been making significant strides. What are those goals and strides?
Well, really the IESA hasn't really formed some goals and stuff because it's more local control. I mean, we always talk about local control. Now, the state board, we kind of are focusing on what the state board said. We got early literacy, K through 3. We got middle school math test scores that we're focused on, how to increase math knowledge. And then you have high school, you're looking at trying to get a, positive placement. Now, some people consider that positive placement is, did they go on to college? Are they in a 2-year program? To me, positive placement is, okay, well, a lot of kids go on missions. They're positively placed there.
Right.
Kids go into the military. Amen. So they're positively placed. Some go directly into the workforce because they've been through CTE programs, have the knowledge, can enter into jobs that probably are going to pay more than my first 10 years in education. So they're positively placed. So I think when you're looking at our high schools, and the graduation rate is important and positively placed, but that positively placed needs to be put into context.
Gotcha. Because am I to understand that historically, if they weren't going on to 4 or 2-year programs, they're like, well, you guys failed that kid?
Well, yeah, because the go on rate is what they're calculating. So
I hate the go on rate.
Right.
Like what? Okay, I worked in college admissions for almost 20 years. That's all I did from the week I graduated college until I moved here a few years back. All I did was help kids get into college. And in a private setting, I had a university. I bet you didn't know this, Matt Todd University. Yeah, you can Google it. I'm kind of a big deal. Team of one. And the kids liked it. But the point is that it was like, all I did was help kids go to college. And there were plenty of kids that I was charged with improving their SAT score, which I did, SAT or ACT, helping them with college entrance essays and stuff. And it's like, all right, yeah, I'm going to help you because that's what I'm here for. And you're asking for help. But I don't see how you're being best served by going on to college, right? Like some of the students themselves would not really care about anything having to do with it aside from like being out of their parents' house. It's like, but why the 4-year university, right? And we have a huge population of private universities throughout the United States that are really just placeholders for kids who couldn't get into a functional public university and couldn't afford or gain entrance into the really high end private universities. So they go to like, I don't want to call them like junk or throwaway, but a lot of private universities on the lower end are starting to lose their accreditations and kind of like fall out of favor in general because people just don't want to pay $60,000 to send their kids there.
Right. No. For myself, I went to the Air Force right out of college. So I spent 4 years in the Air Force out of high school. Sorry, I said college. But no, which actually then paid for my college because I used the GI Bill. I don't think I was ready to go to college at the time. I hadn't grown up in a small town in Cambridge, had a lot of positive teachers and stuff. But I think for me, going into the U.S. Air Force was a huge benefit in how I was going to handle life down the road. And to say that I didn't fit the go on rate, that would be a mistake because I think I made a pretty good choice and it ended up pretty well.
Well, to be determined. But question for you. How did you find your way from the Air Force into higher ed and then into a superintendent of public ed?
Well, it was quite a journey. It was, when I got out, my job in the Air Force was loading weapons on the A-10 aircraft. Delta didn't seem to need munitions loaded on their planes, so kind of out of luck going into the private sector for a job. Mm-hmm. So I really kind of wanted to be a police officer, but I met this pretty little lady, and she in no way wanted to be married to a law enforcement officer of any sorts with the danger that comes with that and so on and so forth. And so I started thinking about things that I really loved. And one of those was, I was good at history and facts and stuff. So I decided, well, I'm going to be a teacher. And she had a good job. And then we talked about it. And like, I can take the kids in the summertime when they're off at school, which really that time that you're really off when you're not doing lessons, planning for the next year's lessons and stuff really is not as long as one might think. But so went to the university, of course, got my bachelor's degree in secondary ed with emphasis on history. Went back to my hometown, taught, coached football, coached track, so forth. And then after a while ended up, I saw a need for good administrators and had some experience in which I thought, you know what, I think having a good administrator to help protect your teachers is essential. So went into that realm and then just kind of kept on going down the road of school administration and ended up, I was out at Parma as the middle school principal and the superintendent was going to retire. The district was great. I wanted to make sure that the district continued to be great. So I put my hat in the ring for that position and ended up being the superintendent there. And then a few years later, the position opened up in Fruitland. And so just kind of seemed like everything was gelling together for me to end up there. So
when you talk about protecting teachers as an administrator, what do you mean?
Well, I don't know if you noticed, but everyone always tells the stories about, well, it used to be like this. And, I went to school uphill both ways in the snow and everything. Yeah. But a lot of times, and I believe that is true, but at least it was in my house, that if you got in trouble at school, you got in trouble at home. And when the school called home, it was, this is what happened. And parents weren't coming to the school saying what happened to the other kid. At least not to my knowledge. Maybe they were back then, but I think that's expanded a lot. And I think that there's many forces in this day and age that attack public school, and not just the school itself, but individual teachers and stuff. So I think at times we really got to make sure that we're taking care of our teachers.
Man, I remember, it was something like 20 years ago or something when the whole like fat cat teacher commentary started coming out, that I think Fox News started calling the teachers like these fat cat teachers and stuff. And they're like, they're in the ball by 3, they got all summer off, they got all winter off. And again, like, the news can have its own take on things. I mean, both sides have their own take on things.
Yeah.
One side thinks teachers can do no wrong, and the other side thinks teachers are the devils. And then you're here saying, hey, I went into this because my wife actually had a good job.
Yeah.
I'm like, I didn't look at teaching as like a good job from, I would have loved to be a classroom teacher. I came out of Cal and I had been tutoring the other students there in the tutoring center, which I thought was great. And I only went into private tutoring because even I at 22 at like 2004 was like, oh, there's no way I could ever survive being like a teacher. Like, that's crazy. But I love teaching. So I had to, make a business, which is not for everyone. It's a very difficult thing to do. But it is really unfortunate how negatively people view teachers, and how even you as an administrator, like, part of my job is to protect these people from like angry parents and stuff. And it's true. I see it play out in my neighborhood and in my school communities as well.
Yeah. And I think trying to equate that the same, just to give a parallel to that. I mean, we talk about police all the time, police shootings and stuff. And I mean, we don't talk about the whole number of police and how many didn't shoot anyone. So yeah, there's probably a few bad police officers. There's a few bad teachers and stuff. And those things are things that we take care of and we move on. But for the whole, you're talking about a group of people that show up every day and come into the building ready to take care of kids. And that's their passion. So the fact that we're taking this, what I see as a national issue, especially in placing it into rural Idaho, in which we don't have the problems of the inner city Chicago schools. We don't have the issues of the inner city New York schools. So we're rural Idaho. I haven't seen anyone that could actually come out and say, yep, right there, that's what they're doing wrong. So until that point comes, let's assume positive intentions for everyone.
Has the litter box in the bathroom rumor hit you guys yet?
No.
Come on. I know somebody's written an email like, I heard that you have litter box. No, nobody?
No.
Oh my gosh. You're like the only district.
I have heard neighboring districts, but no one's ever asked me about it.
I had what I thought was a pretty funny observation, that kitty litter boxes in school bathrooms are more elusive than UFOs. Because everybody swears they've seen them, but nobody has any pictures or any evidence that they exist.
No proof
at least
at all.
You can go on YouTube and like see UFO videos and stuff, like trash. My mom sent me a video off of YouTube that depicted Jesus flying over like Europe somewhere. It's like, okay, you can see videos of Jesus on YouTube. I have yet to have anybody send me a picture or like a video of kitty litter boxes in like Fruitland or like, Salmon or Chalice, or it's like Middleton. Somebody wrote, they're like, there are kitty litter boxes. They hit me this, told me this on Instagram. I was like, can you just send me a photo? Like, I just like to see it. This is one really interesting that I've been trying to explain to people. Moving from California, I had taken my kids out of the public school system in California for a multitude of reasons, and they were in a private Catholic school. And moving up here, I initially was like, oh, we got to find a private school. And it wasn't until I talked to some friends that had moved up here, and they're like, the public schools here are really good. And they had problems in the public school in California as well. They had also moved. We are the problem, in case you're wondering, like we're the problem with Idaho. And again, it took that, giving it a chance and understanding it and being like, oh, this is public school, like done pretty well, especially in West Ada. They had removed a lot of the cultural concerns that I had. Like they had removed flags, they had, ironed out bathrooms, they were dealing with books. It was like, oh, you guys are already doing any of the things that like I might worry about categorically, but people don't know that. So people's views of the public school system predominantly come from like TikTok videos of like crazy people in San Francisco. And it's like, yes, they are crazy. You're like, yeah, I'm with you. But that's not like Fruitland. That's not West Ada. But this national movement has so much momentum behind it that everyone moving, especially people moving here, they're like, oh, the schools are terrible. It's like, really? Have you gone and volunteered? Like, have you walked around? I don't see the things that are depicted on social media playing out in these schools.
No. Honestly, we don't have time for that. So worried about trying to get literacy scores up. One of the things I always say, okay, whatever we did last year, we can't just repeat it because we're going to come up with the same results. So we're going to improve. And so we work on improving, and we talk about, okay, when curriculum. Right. So curriculum is old as can be because we haven't had curriculum money in for so long. I mean, we get a little bit of curriculum money, but you know how much it costs to buy a curriculum set K-12 for a whole school? It's about $340,000 for a math curriculum. So
that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You should have asked Matt Todd. I could have hooked you up. $25 right now. I'll take you arithmetic all the way through algebra and we can go up to calculus. I don't care. Yeah. It's an astronomical amount of money.
Yeah. So those things are the things that we're spending time on, is figuring out how we're going to provide that curriculum. What do we have to do in order to make sure that we're meeting all the standards? Vertical alignment, you get new teachers all the time. And so turnover is real. We live in Fruitland, Oregon, or Fruitland, Idaho, right on the Oregon border. So Oregon pays more. Do we lose teachers to Oregon? Sometimes. Do we lose most of our teachers to Oregon? No, because of the culture that we build, and we try to make sure that it's a positive culture, both for staff and for students, to make sure that the environment is one in which students can learn in, because if they don't feel safe and they don't feel cared for, they're not going to learn. I can tell you that. So,
speaking of culture, I have a very good friend, who grew up and went to school in Oregon. Now she lives here. And she said she went back and saw her home school this last year, and she grew up in this like rural school in Oregon, and she literally went into it was over summer, so kids weren't there, but she observed that in the boys' bathroom, they literally had feminine hygiene products, and she was like, what in the hell is this? And literally the response was like, listen, this is like top-down state requirements that we do this stuff. And she hit me up. She's like, you are not going to believe what I saw. Like, I believe it. I 100% believe. So when you talk about having a different culture than Oregon, it's like, yeah, maybe they pay them more, but you got to tolerate some weird stuff, man. I couldn't imagine. You talk about, you've mentioned now a couple times increasing literacy rates. What are the programs or initiatives that you guys have that you're like, all right, look, how can we make this happen?
So right this year, we really focused on, we're going to do guided reading, and we're going to do that with making sure that, we have different levels in which, so making sure we're meeting the kids where they're at right now, so then we can help them grow.
Sure.
Also wanted to focus this year on vocabulary more, because stronger vocabulary is going to make better readers. And so moving on from that. So those are just a couple of things that we put into place this year. I mean, we have our Title I programs in which we're pulling out kids and we're reading with them, and, just getting books in kids' hands. That's one of the things. Right now, traditionally, everyone always uses AR, accelerated reader. So kids read, they take a test, you get points. You get so many points, you can buy something at our feel-good store, and so makes you want to read more, supposedly. However, that doesn't always work for the lower-end readers. So we found a new program. So we got that. Beanstack is what it's called. So right now, that's working pretty well because kids are reading. They're getting minutes, because all you have to do is log minutes for that. You don't have to go in and take a test right now and stuff. And
when you say log minutes, is this like a digital program on?
No. Well, you have to go in on the computer and put in your time. That's it. So, but
gotcha.
You have your books, you read, you time yourself, and then you put in the minutes that you read.
Gotcha. So then you guys can kind of track what the self-reported reading engagement is.
Yep.
Do you do any? I am not a fan of tech taking over classrooms. right? Like, for instance, I had this really bad experience. I have tech addiction in my family, like well before the iPad or anything. Like I struggled with it when I was a kid, and so did other family members. And so I'm very sensitive to it. And I see the tech integration now being very, very dangerous, especially in ed tech, because there's an emphasis on, okay, if there's anything education oriented that we value, then this has to be overwhelmingly good. Now, mind you, the last time we messed around with like Prodigy math, I have 3 boys. 2 of them would get into these horrendous, hysterical screaming matches over playing this game that was theoretically like teaching them math, right? But they weren't screaming about doing math problems. They were screaming about the game. And like, yeah, they had to slog through some math problems along the way, but it's like if they spent an hour on this machine or 30 minutes on the machine or 15 minutes on the machine, they're really only struggling over a math problem for like, I don't know, 2 minutes. Right. And then the rest of the time they're fighting some dragon or unicorn or whatever it is. Right. But I do think there is a place for tech in education, at least to some degree. Like, is there any program where you could do like the book baggies that are paired with like a video program that helps kids like go page by page and help them sound it out and stuff?
Well, I know that we do have some programs where, yeah, they can read along with the program and stuff. So it helps them keep on track, and that we use that for our lower readers.
Gotcha.
So
yeah, it's just all kinds of, it's because like you got to throw everything at them.
Yeah. I mean, keep going until you find something that works.
Yeah.
So, one of the things they said, well, what if, our scores don't raise that much this year? So then we're going to try something else.
Yeah, but when you have a population that's almost 9% ESL, like you're working as hard as you can every single year. And it's like, you're going to get another round of kids that no matter what, you're starting from 0. So you're really just like, how much can we bring up? Like we're starting from 0 miles per hour. And right now we're hitting 50 miles per hour by this line. Like we're going to start tomorrow at 0 miles per hour. And we're just trying to get to like 52 miles per hour, when we hit this finish line. So you're constantly starting with like, how can we squeeze more juice out of this orange?
Yeah. And I will apologize. I think I said 9% was our ESL. 9% was our Hispanic population. I believe it's like 2% is our ESL.
Oh, okay.
So
okay. Gotcha.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. And again, it's just, it is what it is. Like we have some portion of the population that like the gal I was volunteering with, like she couldn't read at all. And she was in, I think, 1st grade.
Yeah. But I mean, also speaking of percents and stuff, I mean, your special ed populations. So we're looking at almost 15% of our student body is special ed population. So, and then there's such varying different levels of the different learning issues that come with that 14%. So that's probably our biggest challenge in public education today, because 10 years ago, that was probably closer to 7%. We probably doubled in the last 10 years.
You doubled your special ed in the last like 10 years?
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, one, society itself has been changing. So, and then looking and diagnosing different problems, there's been a heightened effort on that, probably. But, and who knows, maybe it's the food that we're eating, maybe it's different things, but the learning disabilities coming into the school have definitely increased in large amount.
I didn't know that of your school. I have been wondering, I have a neighbor who had a 2nd grader a couple years ago. She's probably 4th, 5th grade now. But even in 2nd grade, he and his younger sister, who I think was in kindergarten, they had 24-hour access to their tablets. And the 2nd grader, I think, had like a 55-inch flat screen in his room, so he could watch TV. And they would do, we were close with our neighborhood at the time, and they would do sleepovers at people's houses. And the parents would actually have to go at like 1 a.m. and take the tablets away. So all the kids are sleeping, and then like last kid or two is like on this tablet, just like going for it, right? And they're like, hey man, you got to go to sleep. And he's like, okay, this helps me sleep. She's like, that doesn't look like it's helping you sleep. It's like 1 a.m. Right. And I get so concerned about young people like that cannot, and again, I have a great appreciation for not being able to regulate myself or kids not being able to regulate themselves with tech, because it's like, what happens to that kid the next day at school? It's like you're up till 1, or you're like, you have access to this all day long. Like your focus and capacity to moderate yourself is not going to be there when you're expected to be taking a test. You got like 4 hours of sleep. You're, 8 years old.
Yeah. No, I can tell you stories about that all day long, and seeing these kids come to school, whether it's, you have your kid that was up till 2 a.m. playing on the Xbox, and grandpa, because they're living with grandpa's raising them now. And he doesn't want to regulate them. And so they come to school, or they don't come to school. And then we're trying to go and get them to come to school. And, there's been a couple of times we sent the SRO to that. Luckily we got through a grant. But we have an SRO that we've sent out to parents' houses and say, your kid needs to go to school. But he's tired, or, he doesn't feel like it. Well, I actually had a parent that said, well, I can't make him go. What?
How old is the kid?
I think a 5th grader.
Okay, if you're talking like a junior in high school, I'd be like, yeah, I could see that. But a 5th grader.
Yeah. So, and then, one of the, you hear sad things all the time in public education. Kid comes to school crying, he's hungry. All right, we'll get you something to eat. Did you not have, we'll get you breakfast. Did you not have anything to eat last night? No, I had some ice cream, but that's all my mom would get me because she was playing on her phone. So, now those aren't the conversations that you have every day and stuff, but they're out there. And, that's the population that we're trying to get into the classroom and do the best that we can for them and have them rise up to do the best that they can. Now, are you going to do that when you're hungry and you have 2 hours of sleep? Probably not. But we show up every day to make sure that those kids felt welcome, because the most important thing is they have a safe place.
I have a great appreciation for that. I have a good friend and partner, Deputy Gomez, Officer Gomez.
Yeah.
So we actually made a parent tech awareness bill and a program to go with it, and we gave it to the state of Idaho for every single school, every single student, public, private, charter, doesn't matter, to educate parents about, and it's an online platform and everybody gets it. It's already delivered to the State Department of Education. And there's an accompanying bill that goes with it. It says like, hey, if you're going to pass out tech, you got to warn parents. You got to warn parents and educate them about what they can do with this tech, right?
Yep.
To keep their kids safe. And he has recently moved school districts because he's an SRO. And he was like, listen, you go into some school districts and there is 0% chance that they are reaching the majority of their kids. 0% chance. And it has nothing to do with the schools. It has nothing to do with the teachers. They have kids that are coming in that he showed me a picture once. He's like, I went to this kid's house and it's not a house. They have 2 tents outside.
Yep.
And there was like a bunch of trash around and this kid is showing up to school. He lives in tents. I was like, Gomez, winter's coming. And I'm like, I know. And he had given the dad some old power tools that he had, to like try to encourage him to get a job. I mean, Gomez will give you the shirt off his back. And he's like, this is what you're up against in some of these rural communities. Like people living in tents haven't had a shower in a month. And by that point, they don't hear. I was like, isn't that bad? And he's like, listen, man, you go 3 weeks without a shower. You don't care about a 4th week. They're just marginally making it through their days on basic, like, what is it? Maslow's like hierarchy of needs is like, they're not even hitting the first one, like food and shelter. Like, so you bring them to school and you ask them if they did their reading, like they don't care at all. Like they're, especially when you're dealing with young kids, they're worried about, can I get food? And is there going to be an adult to protect me throughout my day? And hearing that, it's so, to hear that our school, like I understand our public schools have work to do. And I'm not carrying water for the public school. Like I'm not part of the public school. Like I have kids that go to my neighborhood West Ada public school. And then I have kids that go to a charter school that the state of Idaho funds. And I'm very happy is there. And I'm very happy for both of them. So it's like, I'm not saying public schools work for every single student in every single situation. Even within my family, that's not true. Right. But to realize that it's like, look, maybe the issues that people are experiencing with public schools from a proficiency standpoint are really issues with like our Idaho population thriving or not thriving, right? Like maybe getting mad at a public school in a really rural district where kids don't have access to consistent food and showers is really like, hey, should we address the fact that they don't have showers and consistent food first before you get mad at the teachers for not having like English proficiency?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the thing too, when they talk about diverting public funds to private schools, you're not going to have those kids going to the private schools. You're just not. But every public dollar that you're not putting into public schools is then taking away some ability for us to address any number of types of populations that we have. Special ed, I already said, was our biggest one and stuff. One of the things in which, wouldn't it be great if every school district in the state of Idaho had an after-school program that we didn't have to compete for grants in order to make sure that kid had one more meal before he went home? Because right now they're counting on breakfast and they're counting on lunch. They're not getting much for dinner for some of those kids. So I know the 21st Century Grant Program has done wonders for many communities, having more funds in which to do that. That's a federal program, of course, but that's the thing is, are we doing the best to take care of kids? And when we've had this discussion for years now, and I'll go back to, you'll probably get tired of me harping on special education, but yeah, we're meeting the basic needs of what we're supposed to be doing for the special education students, but we don't have money to go above and beyond that. Yeah, we probably could do more. I mean, we're doing what we're supposed to, and we do as much as we can. But I think if we could say, well, we're going to infuse the public school districts so they're not taking out of their discretionary fund and spending so much of that. I spend a third of my discretionary funds on special education. So that means trying to figure out which curriculum to buy, and where that money's going to come from. Might have to run a levy for that. When you're talking about after school programs, and if we can give kids a snack and stuff, there could be discretionary funds going for that instead of $650,000, which I have right now, going to special education. And not that doesn't need to go to special education.
Of course. How many private, you brought up like, look, spending is like a voucher or tax credit, however you want to cut it. Like, I'm not trying to be, put anybody down, but like whatever you want to call the program where we take the public money and put it in the private schools. How many private schools exist around Fruitland?
I think that there's 3 in Payette County. And I think the total population is around 50 between those 3, less than 50.
So fewer than 50 kids go to the collective 3 private schools.
Yeah. And that's, Payette County. So you're talking Payette School District as well as Fruitland School District and New Plymouth School District. So accounting
for likely around 3,000 students or 4,000, like 1,600 for you.
Yeah, probably about close to 4,000.
Okay. So between Fruitland, Payette, and what was the last one?
New Plymouth.
Between all of those school districts, roughly 4,000 students going to those school districts, and accounting for all of that within the county, you have 3 private schools, which collectively engage roughly 50-ish kids. So when people, this is really, thank you for bringing this up, because like people talk about this school choice mechanism or this funding largely benefiting only people in, say, the Treasure Valley, perhaps a couple people in like Kootenai County, and then like some people in Twin Falls, because that's where the majority, like I personally in my neighborhood know 3 people that started private schools, like in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right. Like everywhere you look, it's like, oh, here's another private school. Oh, there's another private school. Like, oh, is that a basket? No, it's a private school. Yeah. Like there it is. Right. And they're everywhere. It's like, fine, look, you're starting businesses and they're for profit. Like, make no mistake about it. These are for-profit businesses and people are sending their kids there. But how is engaging in funding those schools going to benefit your school district? How is it going to benefit all of the others, New Plymouth and pay it? Like, that doesn't make sense, where it's like you don't even have close to the infrastructure to do this. And if you're dealing with kids whose parents can't be roused to give them more than some ice cream for dinner, they're not going to be engaging like studiously this great private school on the side, or at least it seems unlikely.
Yeah, it seems very unlikely. And so, one of the things that I say that we can go down two paths with this if we give public funds to private education. One, I'll give you probably the saddest scenario first in my mind, is all of a sudden you're seeing these people coming from out of state or from the cities that want to go to the country, and they're popping up these micro schools and everything. And then all of a sudden the school is not the focal point of the town. And if you've ever been driven up Highway 95 and you've seen the Fruitlands, Payetts, Weezers, Cambridge, Midvales, Councils, New Meadows, schools are the heart and the soul of the community. It's where people go for Friday night football games. That's where they go for the fourth grade choir concerts. This is where you see your neighbors and you talk about the benefit of the community, and brings us together. In a world in which we're dividing more and more each day, I just see that as sad that we'd want to break that up and have little micro schools and stuff where all of a sudden the school's not the center. In rural Idaho, that's just sad to me. The other thing that can happen is nothing's going to change in those towns because no one's going to go there. They don't want to build a school themselves and invest in the infrastructure it's going to take to build a school. So all you're going to see is public tax dollars coming from ranchers and farmers and, Cambridge and Council on down to Ada and Canyon County and up to Kootenai County to provide a government subsidy for people sending their kids to private school.
Stoney, you and I have talked about a lot of things. I don't mean to end on a dour note, but I know you got a lot of meetings today. Is there anything you'd like to add here at the end?
I just, public education is the cornerstone of our society. And I think when you're looking at diverting funds and giving those public tax dollars to private institutions with little to no accountability. I know they're trying to put it into accountability, but that's just trying to sell it to everyone. I don't know that it's real accountability, but when we don't have the funding that's necessary for to fully fund public schools right now as it is, why would we be diverting public funds to private education? We're short in facilities. I think you had Senator Din Hartog on here that was talking about, what'd she say, 1.2 billion deferred maintenance? I think it's more than that. But
I believe all the people that applied for the $1 billion the state brought forth they brought forth $1 billion that people could apply for, and like $2 billion in deferred maintenance came forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then you're talking close to 80 million. Well, why are you giving 50 million to a government subsidy for private education when we're 80 million short in funding special education in our public schools today? Don't those kids deserve more? Don't the public schools, when we're bringing these kids in, making sure that they have a safe environment, we're trying to offer everything that we can to make sure that we have what probably the people who wrote the Idaho Constitution wanted when they wrote Article 9 and saying it's the duty of the state legislature to make sure to fund a free, thorough public education system. We have the system. Let's properly fund it.
Stoney, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming in today. I know you're running around talking to a lot of people. Thank you for taking the time, and hopefully I can have you back on.
All right. Appreciate it, Matt. Appreciate the time, and you have a great day.
You too.